Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have with me Bert Terhart. And let me tell you about Bert. So, we have to stop. Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, we're going to be talking to Bert Terhart. And let me tell you about Bert. He is a self-described as a soldier, sailor, scientist, adventurer, serial entrepreneur, and author. And he has a knack for knocking off the impossible. So he's the CEO of LeadBrain.ai and the author of, among others, the children's book, Sir Salty Goes to Sea. Bert has sailed solo. He's nonstop around the world, into the Bering Sea and out to the Aleutian Islands, all in an effort to follow in the wake of some of the world's greatest explorers and cartographers. In the same vein, he paddled solo across Canada from the Pacific to the Atlantic Oceans, covering more than 7,800 kilometers by foot and canoe. What's coming next is even more extreme or crazy. Bert Terhart had a lifelong passion for the oceans and oceanography, and with an advanced degree in math, physics, and physical oceanography, he studied the role of the world's oceans and coastal seas play in distributions and salmon migration. That's another podcast. Bert went on to create software and technical tools used by healthcare professionals in Canada, Great Britain, and United States, as well as Australia, ultimately helping in the diagnosis and treatment of tens of thousands of patients. His programming and business skills have been sought out by universities, professionals, and environmentally responsible businesses and corporations in Canada and the US. Today, we are going to talk about something that touches, I think, on every aspect of what he's done here. We're going to figure out a question that a lot of we entrepreneurs ask ourselves every day. How are we getting more customers from the web? So please join me in welcoming Bert Terhart to answer that question. Bert, welcome.
Well, Vicki, it's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. It's morning here because I live on Gabriola, which is a small island near Vancouver, basically straight north of Seattle, right on the U.S.-Canadian border. So it's not exactly pleasant because, it's the West Coast, which means it's nothing but rain. And whenever I hear something like that, my autobiography, I want to look over my shoulder and see who they're talking about.
I
Because it
know.
certainly doesn't seem like me. So
I know. So very interesting and diverse that,
Well,
you must never run out of stories.
no, I don't run out of stories, that's for sure. And I think I come by them naturally because my parents were Dutch. They came from Holland in the mid 50s, and they, of course, I mean, to leave that country that time and come live in the wilderness, basically, it was they lived in the wilderness. Is an adventure of and by itself. So whenever my father would start pointing the fingers, I was able to just point them right back and tell him, "Okay, buy
Yeah.
it honestly."
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. No wonder you like to be alone.
Yeah.
But I have been to Vancouver and beautiful place, and I interviewed a few people from Vancouver, and I always say that I never knew that redwoods forests were outside of where we have them in the U.S. And I was so happy when I walked into the area and saw, oh my God, this is just like I saw when I was 12 years old.
Mm.
Majestic trees.
Yeah, there's uh, the the rainforests here are exceptional. I mean, they're a treasure. There are places on the coast that are UNESCO World Heritage Sites for that, for that
Mm,
reason, among others. But it is a stunning place to live. It's a very rugged, unlike the coast of California, unlike the redwood forests there, the forests here are. It's just primeval. It's as if they
yeah,
were made yesterday, and it is walking through them. Walking through them, just about everyone has the same sorts of
yeah,
emotional descriptors that you just provided. So it's an extraordinary place to live, and one of the things that I like about it is that you can walk the same forest and look at the same trees that Captain James Cook did, or
yeah.
William Bly, or Bodega de Quadra, or all these people that people know typically.
Hmm.
Lewis and Clark, for example, there's places you can walk along and see the same trees. Of course, they were in the States, but there's places literally where you can see the same trees that they were looking at and walk on the same path. So I find that inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. It just is a sense of awe.
Mm.
So we cover the first two easy questions somewhat. The first one being, where do you live? Got that. And you started to talk about your journey, but with your history of your family. But so once you became an adult and you got into all the corporate and academia, what really was that moment that said, "This is my path now. This is what I need to do"? Talk about that journey.
Well, that's interesting because I've sort of fell into everything quite literally. I'm I'm almost completely colorblind, so. And although that seems a little bit, interesting, it has driven a large chunk of my life because I never intended to go into the army. I wanted to go into the Navy. My father was a sailor. He had
Hmm.
sailed around the world with the Dutch Merchant Marine. His father was with the Dutch Merchant Marine. My mom's family, her brothers, and uncles again. So I wanted to follow in those particular footsteps, and I guess in that wake. But that wasn't to be because when I got to military college and they were sorting people out, I discovered they discovered, I never knew that I was colorblind in the sense that um, the scale that we used was 0 to 10. 0, you see everything just fine. 10, you're black and white. That's all you see because you have no cones in your eye. I'm a 9. So,
Oh,
so,
wow.
so they gave me two choices, Terhart, you can be in the army or you can be in the army. What would you like? So
So,
So I ended up in the army, and
um,
then as soon as my stint was up, then I went to graduate school because I wanted to be a
mhm,
scientist. I wanted to be in the Navy so I could go to sea and then get postgraduate training to become an oceanographer and
yeah.
stay and do blah blah blah. Of course, none of that happened. I end up in the army. As soon as I get out, I go back to graduate school or go to graduate school, get a bunch of degrees, and then I'm a scientist now, and I'm going to go to sea instead of the oceans. But right at the time I did that, the Canadian government pulled all the funding
Oh,
for any
no.
shipboard research. So thus endeth my stint at sea. And I had a friend who's a doctor. I still work with him. He's still probably my best friend. We met when we were in grade 3 in Estevan, Saskatchewan, where I grew up. And he said, "Hey Bert, I'm moving a clinic to California. It's going to be very big in the sense that we want to treat a lot of people." He had a very successful medical practice in Canada, and he figured he could do more good in the States. So, okay, he wanted to go to the States, but he said, in order for this to work, we need someone who knows how to program. And because I knew how to program at the time, because that's all I was doing, you sit in
Yeah.
front of a computer and program.
Yes.
He said, who can do this? And I said, well, I can do that. So, okay, well, why don't you come to California? And because I wasn't going to go to seed, there was no sense. I couldn't imagine myself sitting behind a desk and,
Yeah.
having a government job. So there I ended up in California, writing medical software for this clinic, and it was wildly successful. And then it turned into 2,500 doctors who wanted to do what we were doing all across the United States and Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia. And again, I sort of just fell into that. So and then eventually have to come back to Canada with a software company, and then living on the coast, I'm sailing, and then I have the opportunity to sail to sail in the historical context that we've described, as I
Mhm.
wasn't just interested in, sailing from one marina to the next marina. I'm not that sort of
Right.
guy. So, and I guess I've always been drawn to things that are hard. I mean, going into military college is hard. It's the equivalent of West Point in Canada. Going into, I was in the Special Service Force, so that's at the time that would be the equivalent to say Delta Force in the
Yeah.
U.S. I was drawn into programming. Was a time, and at the time I was doing this, we were started this clinic in California. Most doctors didn't have computers in their offices, so
Yeah.
we were actually doing everything, putting computers in their office, training the staff, running this very sophisticated software that we that we had written. So it was a very difficult proposition. So that was drawn to that, and then of course is sailing to the places that I like to sail is not at all easy. So I've been drawn to the more difficult things, and we could talk about that in the sense that there's anything worth doing is going to be hard by
Yeah.
definition. Life is not
Absolutely.
supposed to be easy. Anyone who thinks otherwise, I think hasn't maybe hasn't stepped outside lately. Even Canada, where I anywhere in Canada it's a very, very difficult country to survive in. In the same, even down in the States. I mean, if you had to step outside with just the clothes on your back and survive for the next 2 days with no help, just you
Mhm.
and whatever skills you can muster, most people would be
Yeah.
challenged by that, to say the very least. And in some places, most of the places in North America, um, the chances of you surviving the morning are probably slim because it's very cold.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's hard, and I just like hard things.
Yeah. And I agree. I always found that if it's if it's comes to you easy, then I'm not really fulfilled or challenged. And so it's like, okay, well, let me just add something to that. I'm retired and people don't understand why I have to keep my calendar up to date all the time because I'm so busy, but that's what makes me tick. I'm not saying it's for everyone, but that's what makes me work. All
Well, I
right,
think
so let's get into this.
okay.
All right. So you do a lot of different things for your clients. And I love that you are with your company is all about AI. Again, maybe because I came into the world of business when computers were just being introduced. And I came in as a secretary, and while I was fabulous at shorthand, could see the writing on the wall that that wasn't going to be something around forever, and I sucked at typing. So when I was introduced to a typewriter that actually could correct your errors, I was sold. I would do anything to learn anything about what they were talking about. And while I didn't go the programming route, I did um, learn a whole lot about computers, and that really helped me without a college degree to get promoted several times because I was always willing, as you say, to do the hard stuff, to learn it, to
Mhm.
try it, to go into the unknown. And so with AI now, I think it is just so exciting about the things that we can do with this. And so let's talk about how you help clients integrate and automate customer acquisition and retention using the tools that you've developed.
Well, I think that fundamentally, what really drives business And what really drives customer acquisition is storytelling.
Hmm.
And it sounds like I'm just waving my hands in the air and pretty soon we're going to start singing around the campfire. But
No
that,
kumbaya, no.
yeah, exactly. But if you step back and look at social media with the broadest possible brush, one of the reasons why it has the traction that it has today, and you and I can speak to that because there was a time when there was no such thing as social media,
That's
and
right.
email was a very big deal. The whole idea, well, I from
Even before email, sir.
even well, yes, I mean, yeah. Sadly, I can say that I started programming with punch cards. So,
Yes.
yeah. So if you take a very large step back from social media, what it enables a single person to do is tell a single story, potentially about themselves, and the stories that have the most traction are about themselves.
Yeah.
And suddenly you can speak to not just the world, but you can engage the world. So you're not just speaking at them, they can actually
Mhm.
engage with you in some way, shape, or form, which is what you want to do. If you want to get a customer, you have to get that customer to engage with you in some way, shape, or form. And
Mhm.
when we didn't really, well, that sounds terribly um, arrogant. So I won't say that. I'll say when like Google, for example, a
Mhm.
long time ago, they decided that culture was important. So working at Google was this extraordinary experience. And pretty soon, just about every company was reaching to define what their own culture would be, which is nothing more than defining what your story, how you were going to tell a story to your employees. And
Mhm.
of course, now culture is a very, very important part of creating a business that's going to thrive. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a company, the first thing you have to think about, I think, is what actually your culture is going to be. How is it that you are going to portray yourself as an employer to your employees? Because you don't have a business if you're not
Mhm.
actually, well, of course you can be a solopreneur and you can actually do it all yourself, but that's difficult to sustain.
Mhm.
But if you want to have a business where you have, say, a larger footprint or a larger impact, then of course, in this day and age, you have to be thinking about the story you're going to tell your employees because you need to hire them, right? And there's lots of people,
Mhm.
lots of competent people in the world, and of course, you want to draw some of the best and the brightest to whatever it is that you're doing. And that's nothing more than telling the story of how you are going to engage employees. So the next logical step beyond that is what story are you going to tell customers? And one of the great things about AI is that, and I think this is one of the most profound ways that AI is going to make a difference in the world, is it enables you to, it, it, it removes any roadblock that there might be in your unwillingness to write or unwillingness to reach out to customers because AI can do all the outreach for you. It can answer the phone. You can have it on your website as a chatbot. It can run an entire email campaign. It will do everything that you need it to do to create social media advertising campaigns. It'll write all your ads. It'll do all these amazing things. The problem is, and I call it the Field of Dreams fallacy from the Kevin Costner movie Field of Dreams, where
Mhm.
where he says, if you build it, they will, well, his daughter says, if you build it, they will
Mhm.
come. Well, that isn't entirely true, and certainly not true at all in the web space, because because you've watched this evolution, just because you have a website
Mhm.
doesn't mean that people and customers are going to
That's right.
fall into your lap. Just because you start posting on social media, it doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to have thousands of followers. But AI allows you to take one step beyond all the impediments that typically stop people from telling a story. And it certainly stops and would stop most people from telling a story about themselves. And really, if you the if you really want to get more customers from the web, you have to be better at storytelling because that's all the web is. And AI helps you do that by automating those tasks that would normally just grind you down.
Yeah. For me, I always look at it as just it opens up your mind and it makes those those of us that, for the longest time, and especially and my husband was a teacher, my daughter was a teacher, but when we're four, we're creative, we're innovative, we think outside the box, and do things over and over until we get it right. And then in school, we're kind of told how to do it. This is, and now we get into the workplace and we're waiting for people generally to tell us how to do it and to recognize if we did it right. And then we're asked to go into a meeting and brainstorm. And so then you put all these post-its all over the thing and everybody has their opinions and you spend days and days and you really don't get anywhere generally. But I can put all those thoughts into AI and and ask the right kind of questions
Hmm.
and it puts out all of these things and now your brain starts to think differently and you start to be so innovative and creative and it's bringing back that 4-year-old in you. And I know it gets a bad rap about taking from here and there, but the more I put me into those things, the responses that they get are going to be more in my voice
Well,
and allow it.
I think that you hit on a very good point, and the point is if you ask good questions, you get good answers, and that's been true for a very long time. That's what I mean. It's a Socratic method. It's been around
Mm-hmm.
since Socrates was was asking open-ended questions. So even in the army, we have this. If you ask a stupid question, you're just going to get a stupid answer, and if you ask
Mm-hmm.
AI a stupid question, you're just going to get a stupid answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a program. It's a very, very smart program, and it talks to you
Mm-hmm.
in a way that most programs don't talk to you. And it's intelligent in a way that we couldn't have possibly imagined even a few years ago, but somebody
No.
did. Somebody imagined that you could take a large language model and massage it, and it would spit these things out at you. But humans learn right on the edge of things. Like imagine a small child learning how to walk. It falls down most of the time. So it's not, in order for it to walk, it has to stand up when it can't and take a step. So it's right at the edge of stability, right? It's right at the edge of taking a
Mm-hmm.
step and falling down. When you read, you're right at that. When you learn to read, you're exactly at that same edge. So anything you ever learn in life, you learn it at the right at the cusp of knowing and
Mm-hmm.
unknowing, and that unlocks the mystery of learning. That unlocks the creativity that
Yeah.
you talked about. So unless you're willing to be at that, to push yourself to the edge, because you have to do that as an adult, because you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do it. You don't have to be at the edge. You could just sit down and do nothing. You
Post
could sit and
on.
watch
Yeah.
Netflix, right? Or which isn't to say there's anything wrong with watching Netflix, but that doesn't necessarily put you at the edge of learning. So the thing about AI is that it pushes you to the edge um, in a very gentle way. You can get there very, very quickly. You ask it good questions, and suddenly it starts spitting things back to you that make you go, "Ah, I didn't know," or "Oh, I couldn't, I didn't imagine." And creativity is, I mean, Picasso said, great artists don't create, they steal." So he's basically saying that creativity, like if you took two things, if I gave you wood and graphite, well, what do you get? A pencil, right? So,
Ah, that's right.
so you take two things, right? So it's actually a really good creative exercise. You
Mm-hmm.
take two wildly disparate things, basically wood and burnt wood, and what do you
Mm-hmm.
get? Well, you get something really useful, right? You can get a pencil.
Yeah.
In the case of burnt wood, it's charcoal. Actually, most of Canada, or most of North America, was mapped with a piece of charcoal. It was like a surveyor like David Thompson or Lewis and Clark
Mm-hmm.
taking observations and writing them down with a piece of charcoal. So it's incredibly useful, right? But the point is, take two wildly disparate things, put them together, and you've got something incredibly useful. Basically, look at Edison when he's trying to make the light bulb. It took him 10,000
Mm-hmm.
times to put two things together before he got the ones, and suddenly, eureka,
Lit the world.
lit the world. So it's a valuable exercise. And whenever you're stuck, I mean, that's what you're doing when you're brainstorming with a bunch of people, is that you have all these different ideas and you're trying to put them together in a way that's creative and useful. So you have, person A as idea A, person B with, ID B or ID,
Mm-hmm.
and idea B, and then, how do they relate? So um, AI helps you become incredibly creative because it's a very useful companion to brainstorm with. And if you ask it good questions, you get good answers. So when I say good
Mm-hmm.
questions with AI, we have prompts in LeadBrain that are in the order of 2,000 words. So typically people will sit down with ChatGPT and say, something like, what's the definition of obsequious, or something something trivial, and it'll give you the answer, right? But if you wanted to write something or wanted to tell something useful about your story, you can write your prompts in iterative fashion, and it's a good way for entrepreneurs, for example, to get some idea of who their ideal customer is.
Yeah.
It's a good way to well, you could feed AI something like Claude.ai. You can feed it a bunch of documents, say from that maybe they're white papers that they're in the business. Maybe you have some idea of who your ideal customer is. You could give it a bunch of case studies, and you can ask it to say you can ask it to give you a profile of who your ideal customer actually is. You can ask it to come up with content that you can use on a website or an ad that you can use based on case studies you have on base or based on the ideal customer profile that it's come up with. So if you keep asking these better and better and better questions, then you'll get better and better and better answers. And when I
Yeah.
say better, I'm just meaning more insightful. So there's two sides to AI. There's the incredibly um, mundane sort of tasks you can have it do that are repetitive, that are
Right.
just, that are, say, for example, business today runs 24/7. If someone picks up the phone or finds you on the web and they call or they fill out a contact form or email you, they want an answer now. And if you don't answer now, then they'll just go somewhere else because somebody else is willing to answer now. So AI is
Hmm.
perfect at that. The doors close at 5, and then AI answers the phone from 5 o'clock until 8 or 9 in the morning. It answers all the contact forms. It looks after all the follow-up. It does everything. Those are relatively mundane tasks. But then on the other side of it, you can have it do these incredibly deep, rich, creative type tasks. So it's the whole spectrum. And if you look at so rather than be confused about the whole spectrum, just look at both ends and decide,
Hmm.
where on those ends you want it to work for you.
Super. And I think, along those lines too, a lot of us aren't great with follow-up, and AI
Mm,
can really help there, especially as you were just talking. Um, Either you don't like to do follow-up, you don't like to hear the no's or whatever, but it's really important that you get back to people pretty quickly.
mhm.
And so definitely follow-up is a big deal.
Well, it's the biggest deal because
Hmm.
every particular business has a sales cycle. So it might take a customer typically doesn't decide immediately. They decide over some period of time, and it's usually unique to that customer. There are I mean, everyone knows, I suppose, in advertising, it takes basically 7 touches before somebody,
Hmm.
even knows. So that means you're reaching out to that person seven different
Yeah.
times, or they're trying to. And in this day and age, those 7 different touches can be on Facebook, Instagram. It could be a DM, it could be an email, it could be a contact form, it could be a cold email. There's all these different ways that you actually
Hmm.
have to follow up with an individual. And if you're not using all those channels, then you are basically leaving customers standing, at the front door knocking. And
Hmm.
eventually they're just going to turn around and go somewhere else. So AI is really it's actually smarter than a human at that sort of thing because you could feed the AI all the case studies that you want, for example, and then the AI would know those and would be able to articulate those in your voice by just feeding it those case studies. So you train
Yeah.
it so somebody will have a question, obviously, about what it is that you do, and you can tune the AI to be very intelligent and creative about how it expresses what it is that you do based on the questions that particular person is asking. So it's tremendously valuable in that way. Firstly, you simply cannot understate how important it is to have a 24/7 presence this day on the web. In this day and age, there's just no substitute. You can, if you're not doing that, I can pretty much guarantee that you could at least double well, that might be, I would say that over the course of 6 months, you could almost double your business just by being present 24/7,
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
someone's answering the phone and something is answering the phone or something is responding on the web. I mean, there's a reason why there's an explosion of basically web chat bots because they're
Hmm.
incredibly good at at customer acquisition, engagement, and retention.
Wow. So you recommend tailoring customer journeys so that they are integrated into automated outreach.
Mhm.
So is this with the web bots, or how are we doing this?
Well, firstly, AI has to be tuned. And that just means that you give it a set of rules under which it's going to act on your behalf. It's no different
Mhm.
than giving if you hire someone,
Employee, yeah.
an employee to answer the phone, you just don't give them the phone and say, fly at her. Right? You got
Yeah,
that
that won't go so good.
that's so imagine how stressful that would be for that employee because they
Mhm.
pick up the phone. Of course, they want to do a good job. You know, they're they're being paid and they're happy to do it. Otherwise, they would go work for someone else, and you just give them the phone and turn around and walk away. They'd just be lost. They'd quit the next day. So
Mhm.
you simply need to tell the AI what it is you want it to say, and that's not hard at all. You can simply ask it to read your website, and then you can ask it to read all your competitors' websites, and then you can ask it to read anything that you've written. You could ask it to read, like I said, case studies or white papers. You can actually tell it to go read all the most recent research in your field.
Mhm.
So the AI now has all this in its head, this giant, great big head somewhere out there in the
Mhm.
cloud.
Mhm.
And then I pick up the phone and I say, hey, Vicki, let's say, for example, that you're a physiotherapist, and I say something like, "Hey, Vicki, I see that you're a physiotherapist. Do you work with people who've had concussions?" And then the AI would know that, and it would say, "Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we work with people who've had concussions, post-concussion syndrome. We work with people who've had, various, there's different degrees,
Mhm.
there's different treatment protocols, there's different recovery protocols, there's different ways that you can interact with that person, whether it's through physical exercise, whether it's through massage, whether it's through mental exercise, and it would know all that. It would know exactly
Mhm.
how it is, exactly your approach for people as a physiotherapist who 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 treats concussions. And everybody has something that they really like to do in their business. Like, physiotherapists and maybe let's stick with physiotherapists. Let's say that that particular physiotherapist has a bent towards kinesiology, which is the study of movement. Or you have a
Mhm.
chiropractor who's particularly invested in something like helping figure skaters maintain the maintain the core strength that's required to do the things that they do. Or
Mhm.
maybe you have a roofer who loves to do, high incline metal roofs. So there's something in that business that they really love to do. And there's nothing wrong with, and of course it makes sense to niche down, to niche down, to niche
Mhm.
down, to niche down. And of course, the AI can speak to that sorts of thing for you if you wish, but it's not a difficult thing to do to train them. And if you give it if you give it the proper instructions, and it being the AI, as to how to respond, then it will respond exactly in that way. So it could say, you could get it to sound just like me. You could get it to sound just like you. You could there's AIs out there right now that that if it were me answering these questions to you, talking as I am here on Zoom, you wouldn't know that it was me or the AI doing it. There's a company called
Mhm.
HeyGen that's doing that, and it's incredibly inexpensive. So you could literally have yourself or someone in your office talking to that other person 24/7 in a way that sounds just like, in a way that's exactly the way that you would want it to be and to sound.
Yeah.
So it's shockingly good at doing these sorts of things.
Oh my goodness. So we know that our reputation and brand awareness are important. So
hmm
how do we engage our customers to ensure that we're making people talk about us in a positive light?
So this goes right back to what we talked about earlier, and that's
Mhm.
nothing more than your story. And
Yeah.
and everyone, think of one of the most successful television series of all time. It was Seinfeld. And
Yes,
the
it was.
Seinfeld show was about nothing. That's how it
Nothing.
was pitched. The show was about nothing. All it was their incredibly mundane lives, and everyone just loved it.
Yeah.
So in order for you to build a brand, you simply have to be telling your story. And
Mhm.
everyone thinks that they're And it's hard for people. I mean, I've been talking about this for quite a long time, and everyone thinks that their story is just, well, who's interested in my story? It's
I
just
know.
me. That's how I live my life. And everyone's it's I mean, I get up and do the same thing every day. How boring could that be? Well, I can tell you that boring is best. And
Yeah.
that um it's what social media is about. It's what Instagram is
Mhm.
about. Here's a picture of me at Niagara Falls. But everyone's, I mean, there's a million pictures of Niagara Falls. There's a million pictures of Niagara. So what's so important about you at Niagara Falls? Well, the fact is that it's you at Niagara Falls. That's what makes it important. And
Mhm.
people will just, they love to engage in those sorts of stories that have this incredibly personal bent to them. So
Yeah.
if you wish to, uh, so let's think, if you if you think back to the way that Nike advertised its brand for probably the first decade, they never advertised a shoe. You would have no idea that Nike was selling shoes because all their advertising was around athletic
That's
excellence.
true. Hmm.
So that's their story. Their story, they said, this is what we do. We celebrate athletic excellence. That's what we're all about. And this is all we want to ever talk about. And that's all you ever saw. And but it turns out it's a pretty good way to sell shoes.
Yeah. Made a couple bucks.
Made a couple bucks. So your story, and of course, I mean, obviously they're passionate about that, but you eventually, everyone has their passions, whatever they might be. And I'm, I would say that it doesn't matter what that passion is. I think that most people are drawn to passionate people because that's something that we can all get behind, no matter what it is. I mean, look at all the crazy things that people do, and then we all marvel at those
Yeah.
kinds of things. Of course, you might say, okay, well, and this is scale invariant, by the way. So I'm going to give you an example of scale invariant. It's a big word for saying, it doesn't matter how big or small.
Hmm.
So if I asked you, is Elon Musk a passionate person? You, most people would say yes, right? I mean, here's a guy who's going to go to he's committed to going to landing people on Mars and helping them build a city there. Like you can't do that in the manner in which he's doing without passion because he's spending billions of dollars doing it. He's engaged tens of thousands of people. He tells the story. Think about this. He tells the story every single day. So I know people who are glued to the launch sites just to sit there and watch the rockets, take off and of course now land.
Hmm.
But in the beginning, all they were watching were rockets failing, rockets
Hmm.
blowing up on the launch pad. So he's telling a story of abject failure, and everyone is just loving it. They're just completely
Yeah.
invested in it. But that's very big scale. Okay. I know people who are passionate at the local scale, people who work in the food bank. I know people who are swimming across these vast stretches of open water to raise money for for their community. In fact, this was a 16-year-old girl who had swam 100 miles in the open North Pacific to raise money for the community center in a place that you can only get to by boat. So there's
Hmm.
someone passionate who's obviously engaged in a whole community. Me as well, because as soon as I found out, I helped and well, she was raising money, so I gave her a little. I contributed because I was drawn to this
Hmm.
incredibly passionate young woman doing this incredibly amazing thing, and and I saw the note was this big. It was like on a recipe card pinned to the a bulletin board. So these things, you people just love other passionate people, and it doesn't have to be
Right.
you going to Mars. It has to be just whatever it is you like to do.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, if you think of the characters in Seinfeld. Think of the guy in the soup kitchen who was passionate about
Hmm.
soup, right?
Oh,
Everyone
soup.
loved,
No soup for you.
and
No
there's
soup for you.
no soup for you. But and everyone got a got an amazing charge out of that guy because he's
Yeah.
obviously passionate about soup, right? And anyway, so these are simply, if you want to build a brand, you simply have to be telling your story.
Yeah.
And there's lots of you can do it on any. We have the amazing ability to reach out on any number of platforms. It doesn't, and it can be as simple as you talking into a cell phone and posting that on YouTube. It doesn't have to be anything the production value. This is independent of production value.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be perfect.
No, it should never, it should not. If it is perfect, it means that it's not
Yeah,
real.
that's
It's
right.
it's a fabrication, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, because what do we say? We say, "Oh, that's too perfect," right?
I
It
know.
can't be real. It's too
Well,
perfect.
and the ones that aren't perfect are the ones that get, the highest hits.
Well, it speaks to sincerity and
That's
something that's
right.
genuine and something that's real. And
Mhm.
people, there's nothing more real than your story. However, there's
Mm.
nothing more real than watching Elon, blow up a rocket on a launch pad. There's, there's nothing more real than you failing. And that's if it were easy. Well, Sir Robin Knox Johnson said this after he was the first person to sail nonstop around the world. Did it in 1969. Actually, if you think about how hard that is, um, people had gone to the moon and back before it was possible to sail nonstop solo by yourself around the world. So anyway, he gets back, and the British press, a member of the British press says, "So Robin, was it easy?" And he said, if it were easy, it'd be raining whiskey. So
Mhm.
there's a lesson there.
So good. Well, time is flying by. We could probably talk for days and days.
Yeah, there is that.
I did want to just chat a little bit about the fact in early on we talked about that you have logged more than 50,000 miles of blue
Hmm.
water sailing, and most of them solo, but you did talk about paddling.
Hmm.
But and I chatted just briefly about this, and I said this has to be another podcast with you, but I just wondered, how has this time alone with Bert, all those days, hours, whatever, on the open sea influenced you as a leader and an innovator?
Well, I think that firstly, there's a vast difference between being alone and being lonely. Those are
Yeah.
two wildly different things. They're they're correlated, but they're not causative. So
Mm.
being alone doesn't cause you to become lonely. I think the loneliest I've ever been is sitting in a hockey game, like the Vancouver
With
Canucks,
thousands, yes,
with tens of thousands of people around you, none of whom, you may as
knew
well
or
not be
cared.
there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an incredibly enjoyable experience, and of course, people are very passionate, which is why everyone goes, right? Which is why there's this bonding between, people who have no idea who they are or who this person is, but they're
Mhm.
dressed up, like a Vancouver Canucks, fan. Anyway,
Yes.
so and again, that speaks to passion, but you can be lonely certainly in those environments because there's no connection at all with anyone there other than this thing that's external to you, which is, whatever's going on outside. But being one of the things that's interesting, like if you want to lead, if you want to start a business, which is basically you're deciding you're going to be steering the ship. So if you'll excuse the pun, typically you don't have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of. And in order for you to, and when you're at sea by yourself or you're paddling by yourself and there's no one around, I mean, there's no one around. There's at sea where I was, the nearest person is 200 miles that way on the International Space Station. You're thousands of miles from land. And the decisions you make are important. The decisions you make can, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic or this to be any sort of hyperbole, is that the next decision you make might be your last because either
Yeah.
the boat's going to come apart or you're not going to see the light of day because of the storm, or you're going to break something, or you're going to do something that's going to put you at too much risk. So the decisions matter, which is the same if you have people working for you and you're running a business, then the decisions are important because people are relying on you for a
Yeah.
paycheck and relying on you to feed their family. So there's a there's a real responsibility there. And you learn when there's no one else to bounce an idea off, that you learn to trust your judgment. You learn to trust those
Mm.
things, your process. You learn to trust
Your
your
gut.
intuition, the little voice inside your head, and you learn to
Mm.
make decisions. Like the think of it this way. I think this is a good way to think of things. So let's say that I'm faced with a choice. I have to do something, and it could be that choice could be staring you very directly in the face. Like there's a storm at sea, and if you don't do anything, the boat's going to sink. And I don't mean
Mm.
that in any way. I mean that those are the decisions. I got to do something. If I want to come home, I got to do something. So you have to act. But of course, are you going to do the right thing? What is the right thing? Because now the
Mhm.
decisions really matter. This isn't trivial. This is, do I go and get a chocolate chip cookie or a ginger cookie? No, no, this is, this is more important.
Yeah,
So,
life or death.
and then you're safe where you are, right? So let's say that you're running a company, everything seems to be going okay, but you're looking down the road and, oh, well, the economy is changing and the marketplace is changing and, this is becoming more expensive. So just where you are now is safe. So the tendency is to stay where things are safe. The tendency is to stay there. Like to do the right thing is typically hard. So let's say that I decide to do something and I just get up and do something. It doesn't matter what it is, I decide to do something. And it turns out to be right. Well, I look like a genius because now I'm ahead of the game, right? I figured it out early. Oh, how smart can I look at me, how smart I am. But let's say I get it wildly wrong. I'm completely wrong. I look like a genius because I'm ahead of the game, right? I've figured something out early that's wrong. So the next thing is may
Yeah,
very well be right. So
that's
I've
right.
knocked something off the list, which I thought was correct, wasn't. So I'm not much farther ahead. I'm still ahead of the game because I figured it out early.
That's
So
right.
so it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, as long as you've made a choice and acted on that particular choice in the form of some kind of decision, and then had the wherewithal and introspection and humility to look and say, okay, is this moving me in the right direction? So you have this very positive feedback loop, which is do anything, right or wrong, because you're going to look like a genius, but do it as soon as you think you should be doing it, you need to do it. And then you do those things and look immediately, is this moving me in the right direction? And if it is, then keep going. And if it isn't, you
Yeah.
can adjust. So there's two parts, act and then introspect. And if you get those two things, they're very easy. Like it's not hard to take action. You just do anything at all,
Yeah.
literally anything. And in this works when I was in, as you know, I was in the special service force. I was an officer, and your men look to you to do anything. The worst thing you can do is do nothing because they just
Mhm.
like you had said earlier on yourself. You sit there, you sit around, you go to work, and you expect someone to tell you something to do, right? You don't
Yeah.
really care what it is that you're going to do. You only care that someone has told you to do something, right? So which is exactly how it is. You can say, okay, Vicki, do this. Okay, great. You're a happy employee. You've been told you're doing this, you're doing a good job, all good. So the same thing. So who's ever leading that group or whoever your boss is, the worst they can do is sit in their office and never talk to you. And then you sit there in this sea of uncertainty, not knowing, what to do or who you're working for or why you're even there. So this idea of action, and of course, when there's no one to bounce that off and there's no one else pushing you along, it's just you, then you exercise that muscle, let's say.
Yeah. So in this last minute of questioning, what would three things, if all the people that are listening today remember, what would three things that you would want them to remember?
Well, I'll make it four. It's
All
very
right,
easy.
four's good.
Four. Plan, prepare, practice, and persist.
Yeah.
The four P's. So you need to plan, and plan doesn't have to be good. And then you need to prepare in some way, shape, or form. And then you need to practice, and then you
Hmm.
need to persist. So if you're willing to do, and if you're willing to persist, then you will succeed. So as long
That's
as
right.
you persist and look back again at this introspective element of your plan, then you can't help but move forward. But if you're prepared to do those four simple things, have a plan, any plan, and then think about how that plan is going to be implemented, and then practice, which is implement, and then persist. You don't have to be good, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be talented in order to succeed, but you must persist. And you
I
typically
think
persist in the simplest, most mundane, boring things, which is why I said earlier that boring is best.
I know as a project lead, that was, one of the things that you really always had to remind stakeholders of, uh, that I'm going to give you a plan and I'll
Mhm.
be as thorough and as creative and innovative and provide you this. But I will tell you that as I get smarter, as we do practice, as we do discover things, the plan will change.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, of course it will. And if and
Mhm.
unless you're like in the art of war, Sun Tzu, the first casualty of any battle is the plan. The first thing that
Mhm.
goes out the window is the plan. And that's
That's
always the
exactly right.
and that's always the case. but that's a good thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that means that you're actually moving forward. That means that you're actually learning something, and that gives you the opportunity to sort of tweak, right? That's how things go. If this between A and B is it's never a straight line between A and B. You have this
Exactly.
very convoluted, circuitous route. But unless you're actually constantly looking at the plan and reiterating that process, that same process, plan, prepare, practice, persist, plan,
Mm-hmm.
prepare, practice, persist, then you will get there, absolutely guaranteed. There is no one, and there's no circumstance, or there's no business, or there's no enterprise that I've ever heard of, or I would guarantee I ever will hear of that hasn't em embodied those four things. And you could read, if you don't believe me, you can read Marcus Aurelius's
That's right.
Meditations from 2000, and he wrote that a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
He says basically the same thing in a couple different places. But
Fabulous. Well, those that you are listening right now, you know the drill that you should have taken notes along the lines. All this great brilliance has been shared today. But if you didn't, you can get everything on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling, and as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com in the show notes. But if you are watching, you will want to get this contact information so you can reach out to Bert to ask more questions, to have more feedback, and see how Lead AI might help you. So I am going to share my screen as always. For those that are listening, as always, I'll read the information, the websites you will want to go to if you're interested in more about the AI solutions that Bert has to offer. You want to go to leadbrain.ai. Again, leadbrain.ai. If you want to learn more about Bert and everything that he's doing, just go to bertterhart.com. And that's BertTerhart.com. On Facebook, you can go to the Five Capes, as well as I believe you said Lead Brain AI has a Facebook
sure,
page as well.
yeah,
Instagram is SVC Bourbon.
yeah,
Is that right?
that's correct.
SV,
Yeah.
and that's on Instagram. It's SVSEABURBAN, SVC Bourbon. And the LinkedIn is Better Heart. Bert Hart. As I was doing this for you, I kept on thinking, you should just have the call tag Bert instead of Bert Terhart, just Better Heart, because you have such a huge heart. So Bert Hart, Terhart, Bert Terhart. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Bert. He's going to talk to you about his call to action, how you can discover more about Bert and his businesses um, online. So here you go. Bert, it's all yours.
Well, I think that if you go to bertterhart.com, what you'll get there is all the threads that we've talked about, whether it's the paddling or the sailing or the business threads, whatever sorts of things might you might find interesting. You can follow those
Mm.
particular rabbit holes. But if you're interested in what we're offering businesses, then leadbrain.ai would be the place to go. Basically, um, to get started, we will turn your business inside out in terms of audits, in the sense that we would want to know what your existing digital footprint is, how you're being perceived on the web, how people are finding you, how people are engaging with your business, whether it's on social media or whether it's just finding you on the web, whether it's calling you on the phone, whether it's filling out a contact form. So we'll get some idea of where we can make the biggest impact the quickest, and get you the biggest and quickest wins. And typically those things can happen easily within 30 days, because everyone has holes. They have their things they like to do, and the things maybe they tend to shy away from. So
Mm.
we'll find all those different levers that we can pull, and show you how we can pull those levers to 3, 4, 5, even 10x the amount of traffic that you're getting, and therefore the amount of business that's coming your way.
Fantastic. Well, Bert, as I said, could have talked to you all day. So interesting. A couple more podcasts, I think, in the future for the two of us, especially telling some stories about the sailing adventures. I think they'll be so interesting. But I just think that you shared a lot of wonderful tips and insights for the audience today. So thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure, and it's always a challenge keeping things focused because there's so many really really interesting things to talk about, especially
Yeah.
when the things that are they're staring us in the face are really profound. Like AI is obviously profound. This
Yeah.
idea of doing hard things, I think, is incredibly profound. This idea of journeying to learn something about yourself right on this edge that we talked about, especially
Hmm.
for people obviously that are, our generation, because the my dad lived till he was 96, and he was learning during COVID. My dad was 92, 92,
Hmm.
93, and he decided he would relearn Malay, the language,
Yes.
Malaysian,
Yes.
because he was fluent before, and he figured, oh, it's been a long time. I should pick it up. So I think that says a
And
lot about him keeping young.
yes, it
So
does, because I have found as I'm in my 60s that learning a new language is not as easy as it was younger.
yes, exactly.
Awesome. So, as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.